Hello girls, I am Dr. Shabana Begum, Associate Professor of Zoology, Maharani Science College for Women, Bangalore. Today I am going to speak to you about the energy flow and the concept of productivity in the ecosystem. Here you can always see the schematic diagram which represents the energy flow in the ecosystem, where the sun, which forms the main source of energy, is the first component of the energy flow, and the producers, the consumers, decomposers, etc. The main objective of this is to define food chain, to identify trophic levels in a food chain, and to illustrate the flow of energy through trophic levels. What is the concept of energy in the ecosystem? The word energy is not new to you. Everyone knows what energy is, right? So here you can define energy as the ability or the capacity to do work. We all know that there are different forms of energies in the ecosystem. The light energy, also called radiant energy, obtained from the sun. Heat energy, obtained from sources like sun and fire. Electrical energy, the magnetic energy, the potential energy, and the kinetic energy. As we all know, the potential energy is the energy at rest. It is stored energy. It is capable of and available for work. Whereas the kinetic energy is due to motion and it results in work. Another interesting thing which you should know is the energy flow in the ecosystem. The energy flow in the ecosystem is nothing but the amount of energy that moves. That moves along the food chain, and also it is known as calorific flow. As we know, an ecosystem is the basic unit of ecology. It is actually the structural and functional unit and comprises of both abiotic and biotic components that interact to form a stable system. There is always exchange of material between the two components, and the energy flows from one component to the other. The physical and physiological activities of all organisms in an ecosystem needs energy. Living organisms can get energy only if food is consumed. The food consumed by the organisms is ultimately transformed into energy. Water, carbohydrate, proteins, fats, minerals, and vitamins are the constituents of food. The food for a carnivore is another animal, the herbivore, while a herbivore depends on plants. The plants are able to synthesize food by depending on the solar radiations and by utilizing the raw materials from the environment. Thus, all organisms have to depend on the environment for their energy. The living organisms now spend energy for all types of activities such as metabolism, growth, reproduction, etc. The energy spent is not wasted or lost, but it has been returned to the environment in another form. Next, you have to know about the expenditure and storage of energy is described by two laws of thermodynamics, which I am going to state little later. In this slide, one can see the various components of the energy flow in the ecosystem. The first one is the sun, that is the solar energy which will emanate from there. The energy used for all plant life processes is derived from solar radiations, and all animals are further dependent on plants. About 34% of the sunlight reaching the Earth's atmosphere is reflected back by clouds and dust, whereas 10% is held by ozone layer, water vapor, and other atmospheric gases. The rest, 56%, reaching the Earth's surface, and out of that, only 2 to 10% is used by plants, and the remaining absorbed by the heat by water or ground. Here you can see the picture of Earth's energy budget, how much of solar radiations are being absorbed by the ocean and the land. That is almost 50 to 51%, whereas some 30% is getting reflected out of it. Then some amount is getting absorbed. Then also there are some amount which will be getting radiated back into the atmosphere. So this is what is like Earth's energy budget. The second component through which the energy flows are the producers. So here the green plants you have seen there in the ecosystem terminology called producers. In a terrestrial ecosystem, major producers are herbaceous and woody plants. Likewise, primary producers in an aquatic ecosystem are various species like phytoplanktons, algae, and higher plants. The next component will be the consumers. So all animals depend on plants directly or indirectly for their food. These are also called as heterotrophs. Again, they are divided into primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, etc. Finally, the decomposers are also heterotrophic organisms. They are mainly fungi and bacteria which meet their end and nutrient requirements by degrading dead organic matter or detritus, and these are also called as saprotrophs. There in the previous slide I showed you about Earth's energy budget. Similarly, here the ecological energetics include energy transformations which occur within the ecosystem. In ecological energetics, we consider quantity of energy reaching an ecosystem per unit of area per unit time. Then quantity of energy trapped by green plants and converted to chemical energy during photosynthesis. The quantity and path of energy flow from green plants to organisms of different trophic levels over a period of time is a known area. Now come back to the two laws of thermodynamics. As I said, the expenditure and storage of energy is described by two laws of thermodynamics. The first law is called law of conservation of energy. It states that energy is neither created nor destroyed, but may change forms, pass from one place to another, or act upon matter in various ways, but regardless of what transfers and transformation takes place, no gain or loss in total energy occurs. Energy is simply transferred from one form or place. For example, when a piece of wood is burnt, the potential energy present in the molecules of wood equals the kinetic energy released, and heat is evolved to the surrounding. This is an exothermic reaction, while in endothermic reaction, energy from the surroundings may be paid into the reaction. For example, during photosynthesis, the molecules of the products store more energy than the reactants. The extra energy is acquired from the sunlight, but even then, there is no gain or loss in total energy involved in any chemical reaction, such as burning wood does not increase or decrease the energy. We can always say that the light energy is utilized by plants to manufacture food. The light energy gets converted into potential energy. When the plants are consumed by the herbivores, the energy gets converted to heat or kinetic energy when the animal uses it for its metabolism and other activities. When the carnivores eat herbivores, they utilize the energy from the herbivores. The same light energy is absorbed by objects and water gets converted to heat energy. For example, a bucket of water kept outside the house on a warm summer day becomes warm. The use of solar heaters is a good example of conversion of light energy into heat. The heat energy can now get converted into kinetic energy if it is used to boil water and the steam used to cook food. The light striking the earth's surface gets converted to heat energy. The objects on the earth radiate heat and the air above the surface gets heated up. Hot air is lighter and thus rises up and the cold air moves down. The circulation of air causes a breeze or wind. The kinetic energy is the movement of wind can be used to turn windmills to lift water up. Thus, it is now clear that no energy can be created or destroyed. Energy gets transformed from one form to another. Come back to the second law of thermodynamics. This law can be stated in different ways and it can be defined in various manner. For example, like the first statement can be said that no energy transformation is 100% efficient. Similarly, they can say that when energy is transformed from one form to another, some amount of energy is definitely lost in the form of heat. One more definition can be no process involving an energy transformation will spontaneously occur unless there is a degradation of the energy from a concentrated form into a dispersed form. One more statement is because some energy is always dispersed into unavailable heat energy, no spontaneous transformation of energy into another form is 100% efficient. For example, you can give the explanation like this, where when a heat of a hot object will tend to get dispersed into cooler areas, and because some energy is always dispersed into unavailable heat energy, no spontaneous transformation of energy into potential energy is 100% efficient. Likewise, when coal is burnt in a boiler to produce steam, some of the energy creates steam to perform work, but part of the energy is dispersed as heat to the surrounding air. The same thing happens to energy in the ecosystem. The energy conversion will always be from a more available and concentrated state to a less available and dispersed state. This is the diagram which will give you how the energy will flow through ecosystem from the sun into the producers, from producers to the primary consumers, which are nothing but the herbivores, from the herbivores to the secondary consumers, which are carnivores again, and from secondary consumers to the tertiary consumers, which can be larger carnivores, etc. So here you can see the C stands for the consumers, the R which is there is the a respiratory rate, which actually the energy loss it can be shown in the form of respiration, and the heat is pointed in the form of arrows which is being lost in that sense. Why do you study about the energy flow, or why is it important in the ecosystem? The energy flow is the amount of energy that moves along the food chain. This energy flow is also known as caloric fat, which I have told you a little earlier. Then this energy flow is very important because it tries to maintain an ecological balance. So the energy flow in the ecosystem is important to maintain ecological balance. This diagram will tell you about the food web. Actually, interconnection among organisms is shown here in this particular slide, where all organisms in an ecosystem are connected in a very intricate manner, and the energy flows occur through these interconnections. And these interconnections can be depicted by food chains to understand the basic connection between organisms, etc. Then there are many types of food chains, as which I will tell you a little later about food chains. So here, when you talk about food chains, we can say the food chains can be defined as the transfer of food energy from the source in plants through a series of organisms with repeated eating and being eaten. The food chain usually comprises of many levels. The producers of plants or autotrophs occupy the first level. The second level is occupied by the primary consumers or herbivores. The secondary consumers or the carnivores occur the third level. The last level is occupied by the tertiary consumers that feed on the secondary consumers, and each level is called a trophic level. So you should know what a trophic level is. These trophic levels actually represent the position of organisms in food chain. And in different stages of feeding in an ecosystem, it represents the various levels. Like for example, in the green plants represent the first trophic level, as I just told you. The herbivorous animals, secondary or primary consumers, then represent the second trophic level. Secondary consumers and tertiary consumers occupy the third and the fourth trophic levels respectively. So quaternary consumers, when present, occupy the fifth trophic level. The number of trophic levels therefore ranges from 3 to 5. Lesser the trophic levels, higher is the conversion efficiency. Regarding the energy flow, once again, there is the diagrammatic representation also. They have given here how the plants are being devoured by the herbivores, and herbivores will be devoured by the carnivores in an ecosystem, which is here the forest ecosystem. Likewise, there is one more interesting thing which one should know about the different types of food chains. There are two to three different types of food chains which exist in the ecosystem. First is the grazing food chain, which begins from green plants and proceeds towards herbivores and then towards carnivores. Then detritus food chain starts from rotten organic substances and proceeds towards the carnivores through detrivores. I was telling to you about the food web. You can find the food web here very intricately managed, and energy definitely flow from each of these food chain into ultimately the decomposers will take action, and the organic matter will get converted to inorganic matter or substances, which will be taken up ultimately by the plants itself. Then what are these ecological pyramids? Ecological pyramids, actually you can mention these are the graphical representation of the number, biomass, stored energy of various trophic levels of food chain in an ecosystem. And there are three different types of ecological pyramids, as we all know. They are the pyramid of numbers, pyramid of biomass, pyramid of energy, etc., etc. These slides will definitely tell you about the various type of energy pyramids. The lowermost basal level occupied by the producers, next to that will be the herbivores, then above that will be the carnivores, and finally the decomposers will take up the apex of the pyramid. There is one inverted pyramid of numbers which occurs in forest. Then upright pyramid of number is seen in case of aquatic ecosystem, which is very clear in this particular slide. myself. Hello girls. Now I was discussing about the pyramid of energy, right? So here the pyramid of energy represents the energy available in each trophic level. The producers occupy the base of the pyramid as the energy available is the maximum. The second level is occupied by the primary consumers or herbivores, and the next level is occupied by the secondary consumers or carnivores, and then comes the tertiary consumers. As you can see here, at each level, when there is energy transfer, about 90% of energy is lost as heat. If the energy in the producer level is about 10,000 kilocalories, it gets reduced by 10%. Then in the primary consumers, and further 10% it gets reduced at the secondary consumer level, etc. And the complete statement can be given in the form of a law which is called as 10% law, which is proposed by Lindemann in 1942, which states that at each transfer of energy from one trophic level to another, about 90% of energy is lost as heat, so that only 10% of energy is available to the next trophic level. And also the pyramid of energy is always upright or triangular, because in this the time factor is always taken into account. Thus, pyramid of energy represents the total amount of energy utilized by different trophic level organisms of an ecosystem in unit area over a set of period of time. So the above figure, as I showed you just now, represents the pyramid of energy, and it is also states here in the slide. Statement it goes like this: energy of pyramid, energy loss and transfer between trophic levels. The size of each layer represents the amount of energy available at the trophic level, and that the only about 10% of the energy taken in by the individuals at one trophic level is passed on to the individuals at the next level. So in summary, we can say that in an ecosystem, about it, that there are functional units present, abiotic factors, biotic factors are present. There is energy flowing among its components very efficiently. Then the energy flow in is always unidirectional. This is very important, because the nutrient flow in the ecosystem is cyclical, whereas energy flow in an ecosystem is always unidirectional. It passes from the main source, the sun, into the producers, then consumers, etc., etc. So then you can always say that only 10% of energy is passed to the successive trophic level, where the sun is the ultimate source of energy. Then plants play a vital role in converting the solar energy to the chemical energy, making the sun's energy available to the organisms at higher trophic levels. If any of the link in a food chain or food web is removed, efficient energy flow will not occur. Then always you can say that the ecosystem shows abiotic and biotic factors. There is energy flow in the ecosystem. Apart from that, you should know what is meant by the concept of productivity. As we all know, the concept of productivity is a good example to understand the energy flow through the ecosystem. An ecosystem will all have producers, consumers, and decomposers. The steps in productivity are the utilization of the solar energy or reception of solar energy, food production by producers by the process of photosynthesis, consumption of organic matter by consumers, both herbivores and carnivores, and decomposition of organic compounds. Hence, you can say the energy flow in the ecosystem is related to the concept of productivity. Now, let me tell you what is meant by productivity. As we all know, sun is the main source of energy for the ecosystem. the solar energy that reaches the earth gets modified. ऑफ होगा क्या क्या होगा So the sun is the main source of energy for the ecosystem. So solar energy that reaches the earth gets modified as explained in the previous chapter. On light of the total energy reaching the earth, 34% is reflected, 10% is held back by ozone layer, the remaining 56% reaches the earth's surface, of which the green plants are able to utilize only 1.5% of the light absorbed by the chloroplast for photosynthesis. Then one should be in a position to define productivity. So productivity can be defined as the rate of production of organic matter. It is important to specify a time like productivity per day or per year, etc. Then, as we know, the solar energy first flows into the plants. The first productivity occurs when the plants fix solar energy and produce food by photosynthesis. This is called basic or primary productivity. So one can define primary productivity as the rate at which radiant energy is stored by photosynthetic and chemosynthetic activity of producers. This productivity actually is of two types. You can say that the first one is the primary productivity and the second one is the secondary productivity. So primary productivity itself can be defined as the rate at which radiant energy is stored by photosynthetic and chemosynthetic activity of producers. It is associated with the producers which are autotrophic, most of which are photosynthetic and less chemosynthetic microorganisms. Producers are green plants, higher macrophytes, lower forms, phytoplanktons and some photosynthetic bacteria. This primary productivity is further divided into gross primary productivity, that is GPP, and net primary productivity, that is NPP. So one can say that the gross primary productivity is also called total or gross photosynthesis or total assimilation. Gross primary productivity is the total rate of photosynthesis including the organic matter used up in respiration during the measurement period. It depends on the chlorophyll content. The rates of primary productivity are estimated in terms of either chlorophyll content as chlorophyll per gram dry weight per unit area or photosynthetic number, that is amount of carbon dioxide fixed per gram chlorophyll per hour. Then what is net primary productivity? So the net primary productivity is the rate of storage of organic matter in plant tissues in excess of the respiratory utilization by plants during the measurement period. So this NPP is equal to GPP minus R, where R is energy used in respiration. Then what is meant by secondary productivity? It refers to the consumers or heterotrophs. Is the rate of energy storage at consumers level. Since consumers utilize food materials in their respiration, simply converting the food matter to different tissues by an overall processes. So it is not divided into gross and net amounts. So Odom used the term assimilation rather than production of consumers level. it remains mobile, that is, keeps on moving from one organism to another and does not leave in situ like the primary productivity. You can see here the net primary productivity is equal to GPP minus respiration. The secondary productivity, the second kind of productivity, is the rate at which the heterotrophic organisms resynthesize the energy yielding substances. Transfer of organic material between trophic levels is clearly seen at this slide. So in summary, when you describe the productivity along with different types, you can mention about the primary productivity divided into gross primary and net primary productivity. Again, there is what is known as the secondary productivity, etc. So with this, I have completed a small chapter in the syllabus, which is the energy flow in the ecosystem, the two laws of thermodynamics, and the concept of productivity. Fine, girls. There is a very interesting and important question which may appear about the energy flow diagrammatic representation. In the regular class, probably from 1st of November, they may reopen, during which I am going to explain by drawing the cycle on the board about how the energy flows at the different trophic levels. Fine, girls. Okay, thank you.